Alrighty, hello and welcome everyone. In today's session, we're going to be chatting about the neuroscience of behavior change. So for those of you who are already in here, I want to get our own synapses firing a little bit while we wait for other people to join. And I'm going to pose a question in the chat. And that question is, what is one behavior change that you would like to see at your organization? Questions in the chat. Again, it's what's one behavior change that you would like to see at your organization. So this can be anything. Put down any ideas. Maybe it's that you want your people leaders to be having better feedback and development conversations, or maybe you're rolling out new software, something like that, and you want folks to adopt it successfully. What is one behavior change you want to see at your organization? So I'll give everyone a second there to put in your answers while we wait for more to join, and then we'll get started in just a minute. Being nice, openness, curiosity, less toxic and negative feedback. Love that. Adaptability, starting from a place of trust. Thank you, Laura. I love that one. Having a growth mindset. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Open-minded towards innovation, less passive aggressive. Oh, Jill, that's a good one, Jill. Again, for those who are just joining, since we're talking about the neuroscience of behavior change today, I've posed a question in the chat, and that question is, what is one behavior change that you would like to see at your organization? I'm going to ask you to hold on to that as we go through our discussion today. So Laura, Ellen, looking at this list here, do some of these things resonate with you? Have you seen this before?
1000%.
I figured. Perfect. All right, we'll give everybody just one more minute. So keep putting your answers in the chat. What is one behavior change that you would like to see at your organization? And we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can drive those behavior changes that you're after. So one more minute and we'll get started. So thank you for those of you who are chiming in and sharing your thoughts. Increased accountability. You hear that one quite a bit. Love that. Authentic collaboration. Increasing collaboration. Another big one, breaking down silos, right? We hear that quite a bit. But lots of folks talking about collaboration. So Laura and Ellen, I think that's going to be a big topic, and we do cover a lot of that today. So I'm excited that's something that resonates with the folks who have joined us today. All right, we are 3 minutes after, so we are going to get started. So hello and welcome to anyone who has just joined. My name is Erin Beal. I am the Talent Development Evangelist here at Growth Space, and I'm going to be your host today for our 30 Minutes of Growth webinar. So before we start, I do want to take a minute to just extend an extra warm welcome to anyone who is joining our series for the very first time. As dedicated L&D and HR professionals, it can be so easy for us to prioritize the growth of our teams over our own, right? Because that's our job. But that's exactly why we created the series. These 30 minutes of growth sessions are designed just for you, right? Lifelong learners with very, very, very busy schedules. So each session is intended to give you a dose of inspiration from some of the top L&D experts across the globe, like Laura and Ellen here. And the idea is that you're going to walk away with some actionable tools and tips that you can implement right away in your day-to-day work. So giving all of you a virtual, high five for carving out some time today, giving this 30 minutes to focus on you and your growth. So with that, let's jump right in. Today, we are talking about the neuroscience of behavior change. So our esteemed panelists here are going to shed some light on how the brain processes information and how we as humans form habits and embrace change. So to lead today's discussion, I would like to introduce you to best-selling author, Stanford educator, podcast host and transformational leadership coach, Ellen Petry Leanse. Ellen is a seasoned leader and innovator with over 40 years of experience. As a former executive at Apple, Google, and LucidWorks, she's been recognized for her work in digital transformation, DEI, and future of work initiatives. She is the best-selling author of The Happiness Hack, a guide to the neuroscience of well-being, and has truly dedicated her career to promoting people-first cultures and developing the leadership that shapes them. So welcome, Ellen. We are thrilled to have you joining as a panelist today.
Thank you so
And
much, Erin.
yes, excited to have you. Next up, we have the founder and executive consultant of Wisdom HR Group, Laura Woolford. So Laura's 25 plus years of experience spans across multiple industries, including healthcare, aerospace, transportation, financial services, and SaaS. So during her time at GE, Tesla, and GoDaddy, she was celebrated for her work in leadership development, performance management, and organizational design, culture, and engagement. So welcome, Laura. I'm thrilled to be sharing this virtual stage with both of you today. So happy to have you.
Thanks for having us here.
Yes. All right. So we're, 30 minutes of growth. We got to dive right into the learning. So let's get into our questions today. For those of you listening in, we will go through our questions, but please at any time, feel free to add questions or comments in the chat. We will hopefully save some time at the end to get to them, but we also might answer them along the way if it works for you, Laura and Ellen, is seeing those questions come in. All right. Are you ready, Laura? Are you ready, Ellen?
Yes, let's go.
All right, let's dive in. Okay, so Ellen, I'm gonna throw this first question to you. So we're talking about behavior change and how challenging it can be. So why is that? Why is it so hard for us to change behavior? Can you talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind change and why we resist it so much?
I resist it. Definitely. So sort of three things come up as I hear that question, Erin. One of the things is let's all acknowledge that the reality that we live in today is a very different type of reality than the long lineage that led to the rise of Homo sapiens and our unique Homo sapiens brains came up in. We live in a world right now where survival on a physical level, I mean, certainly there are some challenges, but survival on a physical level is not sort of the moment to moment, day to day trigger that it was back when we were coming out of trees and navigating ancient savannas. So the brain, though, hasn't caught up with that. I mean, we can really look back and say that there's sort of several 100 million years of vertebrate evolution that have shaped the brains that we have. We humans, Homo sapiens, have only been on the planet for, 200 to 300,000 years. Believe it or not, in terms of evolution, that isn't actually enough time for something to really change or even catch up. I like to say that brains and knees were not quite ready when, we went to prep. So as a person who feels these a little bit these days, I feel my brain a little bit these days too. So I told you there would be three things. One is that the environment is very, very different. One is that we must remember that the brain is the organ of survival. And what it's going to do to keep us surviving, because for the brain, that's its job, is it's going to have us repeat everything we've already done. Because based on its record, hey, I won, she's still here. It's done everything perfectly, whether I like it or not. So by running everything, all of the maps that have led, hardwired maps and things that I've intentionally developed and so forth that have led to my survival, the brain would be very happy to simply just set and forget and to say, I'm doing it perfectly because she's still here. Even if that isn't really serving my intentional or aspirational direction for myself. I saw a couple of folks in the chat. There's a great list you called out, but mentioned growth mindset. I'll bet you're thinking growth mindset right now, because wouldn't you love to add that magic word yet, which changes us from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset in so many conversations. But the brain resists that yet because it has no evidence that that new thing is going to allow you to stay safe and alive. The other thing I want to say is the brain is a cheapskate. It's an absolute skin. And what it's doing is it's preserving as much as possible of the glucose, lipids, and oxygen that allow the brain to conduct its functions. So real quickly, the brain, although it's only a very small percentage of the body's weight, is actually consuming something like 20% of the body's energy, caloric resources, and so forth. And the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that deals with new and novel information and very much with change, is the hungriest part of all. So the brain is going to be hoarding those energetic resources, and the smallest signal of threat, it's going to clench down on them even more. So those three reasons: one, we're in a very different landscape than we actually evolved for; two, the brain is a survival technology that maps what it's already done rather than what we intend it to do; and three, it's a cheapskate that's going to be preserving resources.
Thank you for sharing all that. So that's, when we think about the brain, that applies to all changes that we experience, whether it's in our professional life or our personal life. But can you tell me if there's like, is there something special or different about workplaces, in general, that affects the way we approach change in a professional setting?
Yes. We already knew that, right? So the
Yep.
answer is yes. We have to remember that a tremendous amount of the brain's real estate, if you will, like actually the physical structure of the brain, puts a tremendous amount of space and energy into the areas that have to do with social connection and belonging, because humans are social beings. And actually, our species could have never made it through all that it's made it through if we didn't have ways of coming together and doing the very things that folks talked about on the list: collaborating, solving problems together, learning new things, taking risks, all of the things that really allowed us to find and sustain a niche that we created in our environment hundreds of thousands of years ago. But the brain allocates quite a lot of its energy to the limbic system, which is sort of the heart of the brain, very much connected to the body and to the central nervous system, but also very much about, okay, how do I map what's going on to a social context based on everything I have learned so far? And workplaces are social context. And they also can be slightly threatening social contexts because of the hierarchies that we exist in, because of the drama that some people bring along with their intelligence to work, because of the uncertainty that many businesses face as we navigate the future, and certainly because of the pressure, sometimes realistic, sometimes unrealistic, about the goals we're there to receive. So in general, the workplace is going to be a harder place for people to be truly curious about new information and new ways of being in social settings because of the emotional systems of the brain. Last thing I'll say really quickly about that: the emotional systems of the brain often process information much more quickly than what we would call the cognitive parts of the brain. In a way, the emotional centers are the first responder. And in any setting where there's any sort of conflict, fear, threat, lack of psychological safety, call it what you will, yeah, it's going to be even harder.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I mean, Ellen, you
Yeah,
touched on
please.
the sameness, right, that we have and that safety that our brain naturally goes towards. And so when you think about change in the workplace, again, whatever type of change, organizational change, a new technology that's coming in, a new leader joining the team, you're naturally going to gravitate towards that. How do I protect myself? How do I stay with the group? I don't want to stand out. I don't want to put myself at risk. And so that limbic system takes over and kind of shuts down that rational thought that happens in the PFC. And you just get into that true fight or flight. Like, I'm going to protect myself at this
You
point.
can.
And that's
Yeah.
why, if you're not tapping into some of the psychological safety and making people feel okay and understanding where this change is going, they're going to resist it because the brain can't help itself.
It can't. In fact, your phrasing of that, Laura, brought something up that I've never thought of before. And it's the brain can really only solve for one problem at a time. And if you're in a situation where you don't feel psychologically safe, it's going to want to solve for that first before
Yeah.
it can solve for habituating change.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, of course, this leads to the follow-up question then, of course, of, what do we do about this then? Right?
Yeah.
What have you seen work for other, HR and L&D leaders to drive, some of the changes that everyone is talking about in the chat there?
Erin, I think it's a great question. What I have seen work really well is when you build in the mechanisms to include your employees in whatever that change is, and you create that psychologically safe environment. You got to meet people where they're at. And so whenever you're rolling out a change, let's say it is an organization change that you're going to be doing within the team, where possible, include your employees in that process. Get their input. If it's a total white paper, then understand from them, whether it's through doing roundtables or surveys or, having a focus group that maybe helps you come up with some potential org designs that you can actually consider and put in place. The more you get folks involved so that one, they know what they think matters and that, they are part of the solution, the more likely they are to adapt and buy into that change and also help bring their peers along. And so it kind of creates that, okay, yeah, things are going to change, but we're going to create a new sameness together as we move forward. And then your change is going to be much more successful.
I love that. I love the idea of, in most cases, a lot of times change is being brought upon you, right? And you don't have the choice or you don't have input, but thinking about how leaders can sit down with their teams and help them own the execution, right? What's that going to look like? What's that going to what are going to be the steps and what are the things we need to learn, and having them be part of the process. I love that thinking, because I think so many times people feel like they just don't have any power over what's going on.
Yes.
So I love that.
Yeah. So going to back that up. And in fact, I'm thinking of the audience's comments in chat about collaboration. So how do you make your learners co-participants or co-collaborators in the process by talking about what great would be for them? A couple of things come to mind also, the three sort of things you can build on if you're looking to make change more neuroscientifically available. One of them is first, table stakes or psychological safety. If people feel othered or at risk, it's worth examining, what is going on here. And I was with a group a couple of days ago talking about their growth strategy, their leadership strategy. And one of the things that we had to agree with is companies can work really hard to create settings that are psychologically safe. Like, we can do all of the right things. And we have to accept that, especially in these challenging times that we're all navigating, some people are not ready, willing, or able to be psychologically safe. And it's really important to know that psychological safety is a concomitant process. We can do everything we can, and there's relentless pursuit of more safety is a great continuous improvement goal for any organization. Yet let's also accept some people are going to resist the ability of being safe, because for some people, comfort feels more familiar than actual safety does. And that's just a sad thing in our world. When Laura and Aaron and I were talking earlier, we were saying, a great little adage is hire an employee and a human being shows up. So it's really important to meet people on their level of humanity. And I'm passionate about the brain because I think it helps us do that. So first, table stakes of psychological safety. Second, activate an intention. Talk with your group about what the benefits of this change will be. And one of the benefits you can raise is just simply growth is good. Like, really, the more we grow, the more we, it's kind of like this, the more we grow, the more we're able to grow. So set an intention of what great would be on the outcome. And then the third thing, especially, and this ties into safety, is know your values. I really admire companies that have values around continuous improvement, or improving the recipe, or lifelong growth, or openness to new ideas. These are really good values for saying we are on a journey together, and only by learning can we move toward that higher vision we have for ourselves and our company.
Yeah, I gotta jump in on that, Ellen. I think you brought up a really important point, that comfort and safety are not the same. And I think a lot of times we mistake that. We think, oh, I'm going to create this psychologically safe environment and everyone's going to feel comfortable. And it's like, that's not what this is about, because growth is painful. I think I had shared with you, my children, they go through growing spurts and they'll say, oh, my leg hurts or my arm hurts or, oh, this is
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But that's part of their growth. Yes, it
Yeah.
hurts. It's uncomfortable. Think about deep thinking or when you're learning a new concept, whether you're in school or at work, right? And your brain is tired and it hurts and it's uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
it's good
Yeah.
because you're growing.
Right. And I love that, Laura. Remember that the brain is saying, wait a minute, why should I allocate energy to this new thing when I have no evidence it's going to work? And so this is where I think great HR leaders, and I'm proud to say I've been an HR leader. It's work that I really love, but we have to go in and we have to create that emotional charge. It says, actually, this is worth me powering through to get to a higher level. I love that.
There's a couple questions in the chat that I think, Erin, it's important for us to touch on.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
yeah, so one around guidance around assessing readiness for change at a macro level. And I think as a follow-up, the many longstanding employees that have been through layoff cycles or M&As know the realities coming their way. How can they realistically be made to feel safe? And I think that's
A
really
great
kind of
question.
getting to what
It's a
we're
super
talking about
important
here,
question. It
right?
is.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'd love to go in with something really quick to Steve's question. Thanks for asking it. You know what? That's a really, really hard thing. And I've seen this in big organizations. I've faced this myself when I was in a chief people officer role. And one of the things that's really hard to talk about with employees who've survived these cycles is that change is the only change is the only constant. The best way I have felt to take this on is through a book it's by Reid Hoffman, and I'm hoping you can help me remember the title, maybe Laura.
Mhm.
It's the one about, it's called The Alliance. And it's an incredibly good book. It doesn't take that long to read, but it really owns the fact that organizations are always dynamic. It says, we will have an alliance with you where you can know that this will happen and this won't happen. And if we violate as an employer our place in this alliance, this is what we will do to make it as right as possible. However, you are also in this alliance, and if you violate it, there will be consequences to that as well. I highly recommend the book, and there are a couple of really good podcasts that are, that he's been in about that too. The other
Yeah.
thing is, I have said to employees before, is look, I know this is a high stakes time. We are facing some ambiguity. I will not blindside you. I will let you know if there's something you need to brace yourself for. And it's very important then to keep that commitment.
I think
Not
the
easy.
added piece, yeah, I 100% agree with everything that you just shared, Ellen. And I would add to it, there's the element of open, honest, vulnerable communication. There's an element of showing empathy, which I know that was one of at least one or two folks had said more empathy, and compassion needs to be shown. Employees aren't always going to like the answers, but if you can help them understand the why, the what, and the how the change is going to be done, is going to impact them, then they can start making decisions for themselves. Employees want to feel connected. They want to be heard. They want to know that someone cares. So those are kind of the key things that we need to make sure, whether you're in HR, general management, it doesn't matter. We need to bring that human element into the workplace.
Absolutely. So then we got this list of behavior changes that we want to see, right? So we're going to solve for all these, right, on this call. No, so at the beginning of the session, I asked people to share, what's one behavior change that they'd like to see at their organization. So for everyone listening in who maybe doesn't have as deep an understanding of neuroscience as you both do, what's the one thing that they need to remember in order to really drive those changes that they were listing? And probably with a lot of things that you already mentioned too.
It could be, but I think that to put it as succinctly as possible, I think simply owning that, we are more than, I think for HR leaders to say, look, I understand that the brain may be resisting some of this now because the brain resists new things. However, maybe there's a part of you that you don't feel in your brain. Maybe it's your spirit or your vision for yourself, or something else in you that feels really active right now. What can you do to lead with that so that your brain is open to sort of catching up with something that you really want? Now, we could get into a lot of conversations about, okay, now then what is that you inside? I will say, and I have just put in a link to my podcast. I really have come to believe that we made a big mistake about 400 years ago when we said, like, the brain stops there, because that actually made it easier for us to study the brain in, dissections and things like this. I have come to believe that the intelligent processing happens throughout the body, the central nervous system, the heart, the gut biome, all of this. They're actually processing and producing a lot of the chemicals and currents that actually lead us to what we think we're thinking. So our brains are much more embodied than I think we currently understand. I really believe that strongly. So, but I think just owning, hey, there might be some resistance here. Hello, human. Welcome to being human. However, the more, and I think it was Frank said in the chat, this thing about the more you grow, the more you grow. The more you do anything, the more you do anything. The more you shut down, the more you shut down. A great adage from neuroscience: your brain will do more of whatever it's doing right now. So even if HR leaders say that little phrase, your brain will do more of whatever it's doing right now. So if you're open right now and you're curious right now, it will make it easier for you to be open and curious. If you're not, it will make it easier for you to stay right where you are.
Yeah.
You get to choose.
Yeah.
Right. It reinforces what's easy, right? Like what you talked about at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, the brain will default to whatever's easy and what it's doing. So if you're embracing that openness, right, you're going to keep doing that. I think you also need to learn how to be uncomfortable being uncomfortable. It's okay. It's okay. We don't all have the answers. We're still evolving as humans. And I love Ellen bringing up the point of our brain is more than just the few pounds up here in our head, right? It truly is all interconnected. And there's so many studies now that are diving into that and the impact of all of our different systems connected. And so I think embracing that curiosity and recognizing that we're all human, we're not going to get it right all the time, but if you show up authentically and with empathy and compassion, you're going to make it through.
Yeah, I love that. So being uncomfortable and then having success shows you that next time you can be uncomfortable again and end up being successful. I love that. Okay, so thinking about applying all this information, and these are folks listening in who design corporate learning programs. How do we apply everything that you said today to designing corporate learning programs? What do we do to maximize knowledge retention and applying new skills to be able to be successful through a change?
I think Ellen touched on this a little bit before. It starts with setting the intention. What is your intention? What do you hope? Why are you doing this training? Why are you creating this development program? What do you really want to get out of it? And then recognizing that, yes, you hired the employee, but the human is showing up. Folks are going to engage in different ways. And so tapping into tools like storytelling, tapping into areas of role play or scenario planning, like really making it tangible for folks so they can practice these skills or behaviors you're trying to ingrain in them is going to make it stick, and it's going to help them then kind of grow, right? It might be uncomfortable, but they're going to get to practice this, use it, and move forward.
100%. And also I'm putting into the notes, these also all activate different learning modalities in the brain, and everyone learns uniquely and differently. The short-term solution also can be to really remind people, as an organization, we are committed to your development, growth, and change. We want you to be continually improving in the same way we want our company to be. Yet I know all of you, as people who work on larger and extended HR teams, I would encourage you to think about the idea of learning and growth across the full employee life cycle. Like, really, how are you vetting for growth mindset or openness to learning, for curiosity, even in the interview process? How do your job ads really say, hey, you know, we're looking for lifelong learners or people who are looking to get ever better? And I can't emphasize to you how important this really is right now, because the one thing we all have in common as we shape the future, we are all we are all facing, I meant to say face the future. We are all facing a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity. We live in a changing world. You know, a few years back, I know we're almost out of time, this word VUCA, you know, VUCA, about volatility and all this, was a big word. We don't even use it anymore because it's already obsolete. We are facing so much
Yeah.
change, and making that familiar in the culture is,
Yeah.
I think, not only a business strategy, but the most generous gift you can give to your team members.
Yeah. I would be totally remiss too if I didn't bring up the fact that, you know, Ellen touched on it. We all learn differently. Our brains learn in different ways. And there is a real evolution I see going on of folks wanting individualized, specialized development, right? It's not a one size fits all peanut butter approach anymore. And so that's where, frankly, a lot of what growth space brings to the table can support that. So whether it's individual coaching, team coaching, workshops, like, you know, I've done work with Growth Space now for a year, and the flexibility. And so for those of you that are customers, kudos to you. Hope you're taking full advantage of what they bring to the table. I think it helps us as leaders customize those different solutions for the different areas of growth that our people have, because we're all human, but we're all unique in our own way. And so we've got to find ways to really develop folks, meet them where they're at, and help them kind of grow in the areas that they need to grow.
I love that. Our brains process change the same way, but the way we get through it, we need to focus on the skills that we need individually to
Yeah.
get better. Well, we are right at time. I know it's been some questions going back and forth, so there might be a few things that we didn't get to. I did want to point out to everyone listening, if you have any more questions, please send them to hello@growthspace.com, and we will make sure Laura and Ellen get those answered for you. So apologies if we didn't get to your question. We would love to answer after the session closes. So Laura, Ellen, thank you so much for this insightful discussion. It was wonderful to have you here. And thank you to everyone who is listening in. And we will see you next time at our next 30 Minutes of Growth session. Have a great day, everyone.